Well, welcome back to this Revelation study. This is episode number 23. 23 times, guys. This is
23.
good. We're actually getting through it. Mike's been to all of them. I've missed a few. All these other losers have missed a few. Oh, just kidding. Zach, Joel, all you guys, good to see you.
Thank you.
Before we jump into this, last week we did Revelation 11. Today we're going to be getting in, or the final part of Revelation 11, Revelation 11, 15 through 19. And this week we're going to get into Revelation 12, which is a really exciting chapter. We're going to see a lot of imagery in this one. But before we do, Mike, if you don't mind, will you share my screen here so that I can show everybody what's going on? So, guys, on the Burroughs of Berea page, we have had articles on it for years, and they were written on Crookshank's Corner. Now we have a new one. If you go over to articles, you can see that Crookshank's Corner is there on the top. But if you go down to the second one, we have the new one called the Sullivan Standard. And this is our very own Michael Sullivan. And he is writing articles now and sharing them not only on his page, but also here with the Burroughs. So if you want to see these, you can see here like Daniel Part 1, Daniel Part 2, Daniel Part 3. And it's excellent work. And so if you guys want to get some more stuff from Mike, go to the Sullivan Standard on the burroughsofberea.com, and you got it. That is my little plug for the website as well as Mike.
Please donate to my medical thing. I need to get some arms.
You need some what?
I lost my guns, and so I need donations, so I can get some arms
Like
again.
guns? Like these guns?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Mike.
Yeah, you betcha.
No, that's cool.
Yeah,
All
Dan,
right.
just real quick on those three articles, I just show how there's recapitulation between Daniel 2, Daniel 7 with the four empires, the coming of the stone, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds. Chapter 7 of Daniel 7 show how it is not the ascension, it's the second coming and the judgment. And then Daniel 9 absorbs Daniel 2 and 7. And then Daniel 12 actually absorbs 2, 7, and 9, and it brings it all together. So it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very cool. So, as a matter of fact, the Burroughs just did their study on Daniel chapter 7, and we were fighting amongst ourselves. But one thing we came to is that it was talking about the coming of the Son of Man, but not the ascension.
Nice, good.
Which was good. It took a hot minute to work through that, and then I had to argue that it was not the Islamic Caliphate that was the fourth beast. That was an interesting argument. Yeah, as far as I could tell, Jesus wasn't born during the time of Muhammad. So,
no.
All right, let's get into this, guys. Revelation chapter 12. There are a total of 17 verses. I think we're probably going to get through this chapter, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Pretty close.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right. So here we go. Revelation chapter 12, reading from the ESV. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for for they love not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the two wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman, and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. All right.
Well, we should start off by just saying clearly the United States is mentioned here with the woman with the wings of the eagle, and China being the dragon. And we're clearly entering into Armageddon here any minute. I mean,
Yeah.
Did you
Well,
guys?
I'm glad you got that right out of the.
I actually, just real quick interjection. I actually heard, I don't remember whose program it was, but there actually somebody was saying that the fact that the United States, they thought, the United States was all over Revelation, and the fact that they decided it wasn't even proves further that we're near the end, because the United States has to go away first. And so then once that happens, I mean, it's crazy where people will go. So
yeah, and these guys love to self-fulfill their prophecies. So John Hagee's over there, like, telling our politicians to strike Iran and Russia. And I guess if we get blown up, that's supposed to be a fulfillment of prophecy. So I mean, we might as well get nuked. These people are just it's a struggle.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
sure.
If prophecy is to be fulfilled in the future, who gets to determine that it's a fulfillment of prophecy? Was that not a major role of the apostles in the first century?
Well, honestly, Zach, I think some of the apostles are still alive because they haven't tasted death yet. It's been 2,000 years. There's got to be some of them living today. Am I right?
Yeah, some charismatics are having visions and dreams that John's still alive, right there with the Mormons. So
there it is.
There you have it.
Do you guys all see this before we get in and dig a little deeper? See this as sort of a new section of Revelation? I know most people kind of have the 11 chapters together. Mike says no.
I see the commentators that see it divided into two parts, ending in 11, the judgment of the dead, and then chapter 20, the judgment of the dead. But we're going to see a lot of recapitulation here.
And that's kind of more where I am, where it's telling the same story, but from a little different perspective is how I see it broadly.
It depends on how you understand the male child. And we'll get to that, because I understand that the same way I would see the two witnesses. So, but yeah, let's just dig in.
All right. Do you have something, Micah? Do you want to read the first verse again?
Well, we could just start with the woman.
Okay.
There's a lot of different views on who the woman is, obviously. Some have said it's Mary. So obviously the Roman Catholic Church, that's the majority view there. Some Protestants, even some preterists, I don't know how, somehow see Mary. Some say Israel, some say the church, some say
Eastern Orthodox says it's Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Eastern Orthodox say it's Mary, and also I found a view. Sorry to interrupt you. The feminist liberation theology view. The woman represents all oppressed peoples struggling to birth justice. The dragon is systemic evil. The male child is a symbol of liberation.
Well, that's just as clear as the dragon being China.
Hey, we're done. We're done. Look at that. We just got out in 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, well, so some say, well, it's a combination of the Israel and the church, which that's not my view, but I can understand why they say that, at least. Some throw out everything at the kitchen sink. It'd be Israel, it'd be the church, it'd be Eve, it'd be Sarah. it would be Mary. And this is kind of David Chilton's position. Even Don Preston kind of hints at that. I take the position, I'm not dogmatic on it, but I would agree with Max King. I think this is the new covenant and the 12 apostles, because Galatians talks about who's the mother of us all. It's the new covenant. It's the Jerusalem from above. And the apostles are the administrators of the new covenant. And they're the ones that are struggling and being burdened to give birth to, I would say, the Gentile church. But and then Margaret Barker says that it's the Holy Spirit. I don't know how she comes to that view, but those are the views that I know of. Obviously, Rick knows of a more powerful exegetical one that he shared. But
yes, the feminist liberation theology view.
So would you say, Mike, that from your views that specifically it refers more to the new covenant 12 apostles, but Israel, the church, some of those other things are allusions or signs in some way that still fit in the general paradigm?
Well, I say Israel and the church because there's obviously an overlap between the church and Israel, especially if these are the firstborn or the first fruits, the Jewish first fruits of the church, which the apostles would be a part of.
Right.
Okay. And then in Isaiah, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but in Isaiah, was it 66? You have what I would see as the old covenant being pregnant and only being able to give birth to wind. The old covenant can't give eternal life. But then we have another woman who gives birth in a day without any pain. And I think that is the new covenant, because the new covenant produces salvation for the Gentiles. That's what the birth is, right? And so I think this whole scene right here is Isaiah 66. I take the woman as the new covenant, the apostolic church. That's why you have the 12 stars. And of course, in Revelation, you see the 12 again. The 12 apostles are the foundation of the New Jerusalem, which is the bride. So, and the giving birth to the Son, I don't think it fits Jesus here at all, chronologically in any way. I think it's birth of the church. But
so why do you think it's birth of the Gentile church? Why the emphasis on that?
Because of Isaiah, because she's giving birth.
He goes into it right after.
Israel in the old covenant could not give birth, which meant could not bring salvation to the Gentiles, right? But the new covenant church under Christ was able to give birth or salvation to the Gentiles. And so I see the woman here being kind of like the Jewish church that will flee to the desert and be preserved. She flees and goes to Pella. All right. And then the male child ascends. And this is harpazo. This is what I was thinking last week. The two
witnesses are called up.
Yeah. Here. And so I see this as a recapitulation.
Hang on. Now stop for a second. Hang on.
Okay.
The new covenant believers, is that right? And the 12 apostles?
Yes.
So the church, in other words.
Yeah. And where it gets a little
consistent with the calling up in Revelation 11 of the two witnesses.
Yes.
Where you chided me over saying that calling up was the church.
I didn't. No, I didn't. That's what I take. I said that the two witnesses are the church.
You said the two witnesses are the law and the prophets.
Correct. The law and the prophets testify that the church is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, and that the church was. I said this last week. The church is the two witnesses proclaiming the law and the prophets, that if their enemies do not repent, they will incur the wrath of the law and the prophets.
I have to go back and review the footage, but okay. All right. You're coming around.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a testimony of the church. And that's why I talked about the harpazo, in that the two witnesses are a picture of the rapture of 1 Thessalonians 4. It's the picture of the rapture of the church, figuratively. positionally going into God's presence.
So if it's okay with you guys, may I kind of give you just the way that I thought of this whenever I was reading it before? So the woman to me, with the sun and the moon and the stars, of course it reminds me of the dream of Joseph, and that showing that Israel, as the nation, but the birth of the child, because of this, it says in Revelation, it says she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And in Isaiah 66, it says she was in labor. Before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came upon her, she delivered a son. And so it seems like it's like it's conflating the two. Like Israel, I can see why Chilton would say that. Like Israel gives birth to the Messiah, and then during Jesus's ministry, he talks about seeing Satan fall. He talks about, and we're hearing like the third of heaven, like this war that's going on in heaven, and that now whatever this dragon was, like when it says it's waiting to devour the child, it makes me think of Herod. It makes me think of the massacre of the innocents in Bethlehem. Like these are just thoughts that are kind of running through my head, and then you would see the other 12, the 12 that he chooses. If you notice, Jesus says that Satan fell after he selects the disciples and he has sent them out. Then they come back and he says, "Behold, I saw Satan fall." Now, some people go all over the place with that verse, like when did he see Satan fall and all that. I'm just thinking about this within the context of this chapter 12, that it seems like it's Israel, because Jesus himself tells the woman at the well, yes, salvation is of the Jews, or salvation comes out of Judah, like out of this, it's coming out of this. So I see it as, and his ministry is to go and seek the lost sheep of the house of Israel, like the regathering of all of them, and then gives birth to this church. So anyway, it's just kind of the way I'm thinking here. Am I out of my brain here?
Let me put it in layman terms for everybody listening. Mike thinks Revelation 12 starts in AD 66, and Rick thinks it's possible it discusses the whole time of the New Testament, starting back in the ministry of Christ. Is that fair?
Yes, thank you.
I wouldn't necessarily be locked in there, but I could see some recapitulation
from my perspective.
But I think we're always right there on the cusp of the 3.5 years just beginning, and so if you bring it back to the ascension or something like that, fine, but it always gets us right up to the edge of the 3.5 years.
Well, and have you ever thought about the 3.5 year ministry of Jesus and how interesting that is, as far as it's like another 1,260 days, like he's got a 3.5 year ministry, and then we have this 3.5 year tribulation of Israel, and then its final, consummation. So have you guys ever thought about that, like in regard to this?
Yeah, but I don't know if it fits chronologically, because you've got this child who's called up to God into his throne in 5, and then the woman flees to the wilderness in 6. I don't know how that's going to fit in the ministry of Jesus, but maybe you've thought that further through than I have.
Well, the woman that's fleeing, do you see that woman as the church?
The Jewish church, probably specifically.
Yeah. That's how I see it.
So, Mike, you would see that as, explain that to me. The child caught up to God in his throne. If you're saying that's Revelation 11, when there's the catching up of the two witnesses, how they're called up, then you've got the fleeing of the Jewish church to Pella in verse 6.
Yeah, it's the parousia. Well,
this is not an easy text.
It's not easy. I tend to see it as kind of describing the two salvations. One positionally being when the kingdom comes within us, we're harpazoed into God's presence, and then also the physical salvation of the Jewish church fleeing Jerusalem and going to Pella. How the chronology of this is kind of hard. I'm not sure the chronology is really the point of this, but because I wouldn't see the parousia taking place in AD 66 or 67. because in the Olivet Discourse, he says immediately after the tribulation of those days, that's when Christ comes. So the parousia is in AD 70. But yeah, I don't know. That's a rough one.
The one about when, go ahead.
The positioning of the 3.5 years is what makes it so hard, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that throws me off the most is whenever Jesus says, I saw Satan, coming down out of heaven like lightning. That to me, it was when he was sending out his disciples into Israel, seeking out the lost sheep, and they came back and said, all of the things that you have told us to do, we have done. And they have answered, these demons are answering to us, and all of this is happening. And he says, and I saw that. And that it just rings in my ears. How many times does Satan have to get cast out of heaven? Like, is Jesus seeing a future? Like, he knows because of what's going on in Israel, he sees the future of, like, now I know because this is happening, Satan's going to be cast down, and 40 years from now, he's done.
That's the way some people have interpreted it. And I would kind of lean in that direction, just because,
which aligns with Daniel. It aligns with Daniel because of Michael, right? Michael at that time, and Michael because Michael's the one having war, right? Or with that dragon, right?
Well, that, and I would agree with you. It's like, well, how many times is Satan cast down? I mean, I think this is a perfect parallel with Revelation 20 as well. So
I know Bob has done, was it maybe, it might have been 2 or 3 years, maybe even 3 years ago at Brian or something, but he did some talks on this, and then in Jesus' ministry, how he was correlating some of that to Revelation. But I'm probably a little more because of 119. Some of these things have already happened. Some are happening. Some have a future. I'm comfortable at least seeing this in some way as allusions to things, in the time of Jesus, before the final, before AD 66 in there, but I'm not super dogmatic about it either, because I think so many of these things are signs and illusions that incorporate a lot of different elements. So that's kind of where I am.
Right on. Right. Okay. So the woman has 12 stars. Okay. So obviously some people think it's Old Covenant Israel because 12 tribes. Others, like myself, 12 apostles. New Covenant gives birth to us all. But let's look at some of this other imagery here. With the sun. Okay. So Jesus, Malachi 4:2, comes as the Son of Righteousness with healing in his wings. Everybody knows I go with a faithful version and the Aramaic English translation of Matthew 24:27. He comes as the light of day, shining from the east to the west. Daniel 12 talks about in the resurrection, in the kingdom. Jesus quoting that, Matthew 13:43 says that we're going to shine with him in the Father's kingdom. So we're shining with him with the sun, right? Peter says that the day was dawning within them. Revelation talks about inheriting the morning star.
Yeah, but I'd play it the other way and say Philippians 2:15, they already shine as lights before that. And then Matthew 13:43. I don't know. Matthew 13:43 quoting Daniel 12:4 is about the resurrection. So, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Peter says it was dawning in them. So it was coming. Okay, so the kingdom's coming. Christ is coming as the Son of Righteousness. He's going to give the church his righteousness. And so they're going to be glorified and they're going to shine as the New Jerusalem, and the light's never going to go out. All right. And then with the moon under her feet. So Romans 13:11 and 12 gives the idea that the old covenant age was an age of darkness. The new covenant age is an age of perpetual light, because Christ is the sun. We are imparted that light and glory. And so the new covenant is having dominance over the moon because the sun is the greater light and the moon is the lesser light. And so this is a position of dominance of the new covenant over the old covenant. Remember early on in Revelation, he says, those that say they're Jews and are not, and are of the synagogue of Satan, I'm going to make them bow down before you. Here's a great picture of it right now.
All right, Jeremiah 31:35. Thus says the Lord, who gives the sun for a light by day, ordinances of the moon and stars for light by night, who disturbs the sea and its waves roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from me before me, says the Lord, then the seed of Israel shall also cease from being a nation before me forever.
Amen. And we know what the seed and we know what the nation is according to Jesus and Paul, right?
That's good, guys. Wow.
It's not the physical descendants of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's Christ and those who put their faith in him. That's good. That's a good.
Yeah, that was good, Zach. So,
Okay, yeah, then never mind. Go ahead.
Just let me hit Romans real quick because Mike started with that. So 13:11. Besides this, you know the time, the hour has come for you to wake from sleep. Salvation is nearer to us than when we first believed. The night is far gone, the day is at hand. And unless you have fulfillment, we're still waiting for the day that Paul already said was at hand then. So I know a lot of people know that reference, but that is to me like there's certain verses that are like slam dunk type verses, and I mean you got most of the church waiting for the day. And which means that right now we're still in the night, which is, so I mean, it's just wanted to point that out for people maybe who don't know the reference.
Exactly. I think we've covered some already. The moon's under her feet. Let's see what else. I already talked about that. Oh, so I was thinking of 2 Corinthians 3 as well, with the sun and the moon. You have two glories, right? You have a dominant glory and you have a lesser glory. And of course, between 30 to 70, they were being transformed into the new covenant glory and going from old covenant glory to new covenant glory. And I don't know, I think we've covered most of this already. Oh, okay. Let's talk about this. The birth of this male child. It's got to be the church. It's got to be an aspect of the Gentile church, the fullness of the Gentiles. I'm thinking Romans 11 probably, and them just coming into Israel's promises completely. Ezekiel 36:37, John 3, Acts 13. Jesus is the firstborn at his resurrection, and he ascends. So birth and resurrection is just two ways of saying the same thing. And in Ezekiel 36:37 and John 3, when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus about being born again, and he chides him for not knowing the scriptures, what scriptures is he talking about? Ezekiel 36:37. Israel would go through a birth resurrection process. The nation as a whole would go through a covenantal transition that would be a birthing process. Birth, resurrection, same thing. And so I know there's an individual aspect in John 3 where each individual needs to be born again, but also there's a corporate body concept that the nation itself, going from covenant to covenant, would go through this birth. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
And then people always think this is Christ because Psalm 2 is alluded to. Let's see here, verse, and the dragon, so that when she bore her child, you might devour. Where is it, the male child? Okay. Verse 5. She gave birth to the male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up. Well, what have we seen already in Revelation? Revelation promises one of the churches, if they persevere, what are they going to do? They're going to rule the nations with a rod of iron.
That's Daniel 7 when this kingdom's given to the saints also.
Exactly.
Yes, it is. Yep.
And
I
that
have
10
that here in my
horns,
notes.
that 10 horns, 7 diadems makes a Daniel 7 connection to me. See, I've always seen this as I would have said that the woman was essentially Mary, the child was Christ, and the other deal, but you're making a good case for this.
Yeah. Let me read you. This is a futurist. He's not even a preterist, but he sees the corporate body concept here. Let me read it. In Acts 13, we learn that Jesus' resurrection and ascension was his born again experience. And a lot of people are shocked at first to hear that, but it's true. Just read the passage. Men and brethren, sons of the family of Abraham, and those among you who fear God, to you the word of this salvation has been sent. But God raised him from the dead. He was seen for many days by those who came up with him from Galilee to Jerusalem, who are witnesses to the people. And we declare to you glad tidings, that promise which was made to the fathers. God has fulfilled this for us, their children, and that he has raised up Jesus, as it is also written in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I have begotten you, at his resurrection and his ascension. Okay. The Psalm 2 makes clear the birth it mentions was the Messiah's enthronement as king. Jesus was begotten from the dead by the Father and ascended to his right hand to reign. It was this foundational birth from above. Remember, Jesus said you have to be
Wow.
born from above, right?
That is wow. That is good considering where we are in Revelation and what we just saw with the Ancient of Days.
Yes. That then set
But again, that would be the ascension. Sorry, I'm just thinking out loud.
For the Spirit's promised work. Then he said to them, thus it is written, and thus it was necessary for Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name to all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. And you are witnesses of these things. Behold, I send the promise of my Father unto you, but tarry in Jerusalem until you are endued with power on high. Now, watch this. Pentecost was the beginning of the rebirth or resurrection, beginning resurrection, that was promised by Ezekiel and described by Jesus. God had promised this water spirit resurrection of Israel. And on Pentecost, after Jesus' glorification, he kept his word and began to breathe new life into Israel's dry bones. Ezekiel 37. And throughout Acts, we are told of the effects of this event at the Pentecostal rebirth of Israel, spread first to many Jews, the promises to you, Jews, and to your children, and then on to the nations as the prophets had foretold. So I like that because he sees the need for the corporate body of Israel to go through a new covenant birth resurrection process. That's why he's chiding Nicodemus. You don't understand Ezekiel 36 and 37? You don't realize that the new covenant is here in me, and you're going to have to be born from above. It's totally different.
Hey, Mike, what's the reference for that? Who's the author?
Let me go back. I cited this guy, and I think
it's like Derek somebody, right?
Yeah, Derek
Oliff.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
Yeah, I like what he did there.
But what I was saying out loud, sorry, Zach, 1 second. What I was saying out loud was, how we had looked at the Ancient of Days, of course, not saying it's the ascension, looking at it as the second coming, but with the way that he said it right there, the first thing that my brain thought was that's exactly what Jesus is doing in Revelation 11, if that's what's going on. But the ascension would have been a lot earlier. So anyway, what I'm saying is that's what I was blurting out because I was thinking about the ascension. And then I was thinking of Revelation 11.
Yeah, but his point is the birth of the church, the full birth of the church is when they ascend, which is Revelation 11, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now again, through the male child, the church. So that's why I see recapitulation between chapter 11 and chapter 12, because the two witnesses, I believe, is the church, and I believe the male child is the church.
I see that, but I don't know how you wouldn't have to put that in 66 based on verse 6 saying that the 3.5 years occur after that.
Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that until just right as you said that.
But I like what you Because I'll be honest, the events after this make a whole lot more sense in AD 66 to 70 to me once we get to verse 7.
Yeah.
For several reasons.
Her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness. It seems to be saying that it's taking place at the same time. Or it could just be that right around this time, this is what happened to both groups. I don't know. But anyway, verses 7 and on. So the question begging after verse 6 is, why is the woman being persecuted? And then verses 7 to 17 answers that question.
So Daniel 7, verse 27, then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people, the saints of the Most High. This kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. That sounds like that section right there in Revelation 12 to me.
The saints are inheriting the kingdom after a period of persecution when the Son of Man comes. Yeah.
Well, the timing wise, though, I mean, it says that verse 5, she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God in his throne. I don't know. This has perplexed me for 4 years.
Well, that's good. It's good to have that every once in a while. But I mean, that's just how I see it. To me, that just is the clearest understanding. Isaiah 66, and that this is the birth of the church. Because if you take it as Jesus, like Zach said, the chronology here is just it doesn't match up.
Well, because you've got an issue of the Great Tribulation here. So take the traditional view where it says that the she is whoever you want to make the she is, Mary or the church or Israel, whoever, but make the child Jesus. Verse 5, she bore a male child who was to rule all nations. Make that Jesus. The child was caught up to God in his throne, Christ ascension, make it that. Then the woman flees to the wilderness, and then you got 3.5 years. Well, you don't have 3.5 years. You've got 37 years. So
right.
I don't know. That's why I said earlier, the 3.5 years is what makes this hard.
Right.
That's why to me, like the ministry, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But the ministry of Jesus, because when Jesus sits down in Nazareth after coming out, he wins the temptation in the desert. He goes back to Nazareth and he sits down. He reads from Isaiah and he says, "Today, this is the day of the Lord." This is the how does he say it? It's like not the vengeance, but the other side of it. It's Isaiah 61.
It's the Jubilee.
Yeah, he's saying that this is that year, that good and year of the Lord.
Healing, yeah.
Jubilee. Yeah.
Right. But then, so he's got 3.5 years of ministry. And when he gets to the Mount of Olives, he tells them that now these be the days of vengeance. Now he starts talking about that future time.
The other 3 years.
The other 3.5. So even though it's not working in the time frame, I see that peaceful time where she's fleeing or whatever, that this is what was, because it says that he ascended to the throne. And so I'm wondering, like, at Jesus's baptism, God the Father speaks and says, here he is, listen to him. And then the Spirit comes down, and then he goes to be tempted of Satan. And then he goes and he gives this Jubilee year. And then he's got 3.5 years where he is plundering. And then he announces the future. You see, I can't make it work, but that's the imagery that's floating through my head.
Right. Well, I think it's because John is kind of doing this on purpose, because he's showing how the church recapitulates what happens to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
What do you think that part in Isaiah 66:8 means when it says that a nation shall be born in one day? Because I went to Isaiah 66 this morning. I'm in Esther 3. In Esther 3, it says that in the Septuagint, it says that Haman wanted to destroy the Jews in one day. And later in Esther 8, when Mordecai's and Esther's decree goes out, it says that it would all be accomplished in one day. It's playing off that same thing, but I don't know what it means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, in that same area in Isaiah 66 and verse 7, before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before she was in labor, she gave birth, before her pain came upon her. Here in Revelation 12, verse 2, she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains. Jesus talks about this in the Olivet Discourse. He says, these are the beginning of the birth pains, right? So that's what's so weird about this, is because whatever this was pregnant, was crying out in birth pains, and then the agony of birth, right?
But in the
So
discourse, he also says that some are going to die. And then he says, and then some of you, not a hair of your head's going to be touched.
mhm.
So I don't know if we can press things with a hyper, literalism.
I understand. It's just
What,
when
what are
we
you
read
what are you
this,
saying, Rick? That makes it lean more toward Jesus' ministry or more toward AD 66?
well, because of the birth pains, that's coming later. But remember, in Isaiah 66, it says before she was in labor, she gave birth. Right? It's almost like there's two births that are happening, because she's in Revelation 12, she was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth
I
at
think
that point.
I think the point in Isaiah 66 is that it's a painless birth.
Right?
Whereas
To me, I see it as the birth pangs going into these new covenants.
whereas the contrast to the other woman, she's constantly in labor.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And all she can do is bear forth to wind.
Mm-hmm.
She's having a perpetual what do you call it? Where you I'm not a woman, so I don't know what the term is. But anyway,
Like
the
false
picture,
labor?
yes, she's constantly having. You know how horrible of an experience that would be? That's life under the old covenant. Constantly in pain, never being able to get your forgiveness of sin, never being able to bring salvation to the Gentiles. That's the picture of Jerusalem from below.
What you got, Zach?
I mean, okay, so in Isaiah 66, you have the persecution of the woman, because in verse 5, right before verse 8, where she gives the birth in one day, it says, hear the word, the headings, the Lord vindicates Zion. Hear the word of the Lord, you who tremble at his word. Your brethren who hated you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, let the Lord be glorified, that we may see your joy. But they shall be ashamed. The sound of the noise from the city, a voice of the temple, the voice of the Lord, who fully repays his enemies. So that seems like the apostate Jews who have been persecuting there to me, who are going to be judged.
Where do you guys put the writing of Revelation approximately?
We don't know.
I think it's before 66, probably 80, 65.
Yeah.
Right around the time that Peter and Paul are both being killed. And
the reason I'm asking, because this is, and I may be missing something here, but this is just I keep thinking about kind of what Rick you're saying, and I'm hearing you say that it doesn't work out in some ways chronologically, but yet you keep seeing allusions back to the ministry of Jesus. Is that fair?
yes.
And if these last three, we agree the 3.5 period is like 66 something to 70 AD, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if Revelation was written even like at the beginning of 66, some people put it as early 62, 65, somewhere in there, it wouldn't have made sense for John to say some of these things have already happened if they weren't even in that 3.5 year period. That it can't be relegated to a 3.5 period if the writing was written before that 3.5 period started. If he says some things have already happened, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Logically, that doesn't work, and so some of it has to be referring to things that I'm not saying this particular section, but specifically, but some things, if they've already happened, they can't be relegated to a 3.5 period if the book was written before that 3.5 period started. And
I would personally take the position that Revelation was written during the tribulation.
In the midst of it. Yeah, it says it. Well, it says it right at the beginning that he was enduring this tribulation with them. So that's fine. I just always thought as somewhat as like the Neronic persecution prior to the tribulation. You think it's the tribulation itself? Okay,
that other one's not
makes
in the Bible.
sense, huh?
That other one's not in the Bible.
Neronic? Yeah, you're right. It's not. You're exactly right.
So you would say, Zach, that even when he's saying some of these things have already happened, some of them are happening. The things that already happened. The things could have been like within a few months rather than.
I'm not convinced that some of those plagues, like in Revelation 6, weren't earlier in the New Testament times. I don't know that for sure, but
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard.
So
That's a hard.
at any point in this chapter, and at any point in this chapter 12, is the second coming mentioned anywhere in this chapter? It's not. The woman is given the two wings of the great eagle so that she might fly away later. We haven't even got there, but the reason I'm saying this is because when you think of the wilderness, we always think of it as a bad thing, but here it's seen as a good thing because this is a place that God has prepared for her, and this is where the nourishment happens. Again, that is the 3.5 years of Jesus. The way I see it, Jesus is not in the heaven. He's not inside Jerusalem or in the holy city. He is in the northern tribes out seeking those that are the lost sheep, and he is nourishing. But it says he's already caught up. But I think that's the baptism. I think that he is the Christ. He is the Messiah. He's the one on the earth. And so I see that church being nourished prior to the birth pains later. You see what I'm saying?
So you're saying the 3.5 years is the time of the New Testament?
I'm saying the 3.5 years is Christ's ministry. That's the nourishing. That's the nourishing part. They weren't ready. And then till the end, at the end of that, in the Olivet Discourse, then that's when Jesus says, these are the beginning of the birth pains. He's talking about what comes on this nation at that time. But the nourishing of the woman, who Mike sees as the church, happens during the ministry of Jesus.
She has a place
Well,
prepared by God.
You don't like it? You don't like that? I can't get it out of my head, guys.
We're definitely at the 3.5 years between 66 and 70, or 67 and 70, because Satan is cast down and his time is short. This is Revelation 20. He's cast down for his time is short. So now we're at 66, 67, where he's gathering the nations to come against the saints for the war. Right? And that's why we see the woman fleeing and going to Pella and being preserved for that period, because they're in Pella and they're not in the city.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would understand that.
I understand. I do.
I don't know.
I mean, you could look at it that way, where you just said like gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule, and you conflated that idea with his resurrection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, not his ascension, but his ascension his ascension, his resurrection and ascension was his new birth. You were using that from Derek Olive, right?
He's the firstborn.
Right. That's not AD 66.
I'm quoting Derek because he sees what preterists is seeing.
Yeah, the corporate side of this.
Right.
Absolutely.
Jesus is the firstborn because he's the first to overcome the Adamic death, spiritual death. And then now the church is gonna recapitulate that, and she's gonna be born again in AD 70 corporately, Ezekiel 36 and 37. She's gonna have to go through that birth process. She's gonna be resurrected. And we see a lot of recapitulation between what happened to Jesus and what's happening to the church.
So the male child has to be, to me, like it's always being said as Messiah. But if you think about it like this, you've got a woman who is in travail giving birth to a male child, but then that child is caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman, so who is to rule all the nations with the rod of iron. Didn't you say that that's the church?
Yes.
Then the male child is the church.
And that's the tricky part, because how can the church give birth to the church? Right?
Because it's Israel that gives birth to the church.
The woman is Israel.
The woman is Israel. That's why she's going to be considered a harlot later.
It's the
righteous remnant of Israel.
There you go. That's what I'm trying to say. It's the faithful, righteous remnant of Israel that's giving the birth.
That's why I said at the very beginning, they're not all wrong.
Right. That's why I said that combination of church and Israel is right, because if you look at it as the righteous remnant, as the apostles, right, the 12 stars given.
You know what I'm thinking? How dare I say that we're going to get through this chapter in an hour? We haven't even got through the first 6 verses.
I don't know. I don't think we need to stop, though. Because if we stop, we won't pick up this train of thought. Like, I think we need to keep plugging.
I'm not stopping. I'm not
Yeah,
stopping. I'm just saying. I'm saying at that point. So do we move on from 6 and go into 7 and talk about the war in heaven with Michael?
Well, I think the rest of it might help clarify the beginning of it, depending on what we
Okay.
do with it. But I don't know. That's up to y'all. Don't let me keep us too long. But
No, it's fine.
I hate to, while we're thinking, I hate to stop it.
I don't have any hard stop tonight. It's up to you guys. Now, war arose in heaven. Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him.
Mike, you got this at 8066?
I would have to say, yeah. I see this as Revelation 20. I mean, he's cast down to go deceive the nations, whether those nations are the Zealots or the Romans, to come against the city for the war.
So you've got this. So this is when the beast, which is Satan in Revelation 20, is released out of the bottomless pit.
I think that's, I mean, wouldn't you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot earlier than this, guys. I can't go with that right now. I just can't.
Okay.
Because all power and authority was given to Christ so much earlier. I don't understand why it would show up so much later. Oh, it doesn't make any sense.
I think it's the little season.
Yeah.
Oh.
It
That's
says
good.
later on.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on that for sure. I was thinking of that.
Short. It says his time is short. Look at verse 12. He knows that his time is short, and that's what's so funny. He's bound, and then he's let loose for a little while. A little while. The time is short. This is the same 3.5 year period that he gathers the nations.
So can I say how I have this?
Yeah.
All right. And I could be wrong, but currently, and I've changed my mind 5,000 times in Revelation 12. So as of today, here's how I have this. I have Michael and his angels. Okay. A war breaks out in heaven. All right. The church had been raised up and seated in heavenly places. Okay. So whatever you want to do with that, I'm taking the dragon and his angels to be apostate Israel and that whole crew. They did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. I have this as the unleashing of Satan, where he's thrown down to the earth for a little while, or as Revelation 20 puts it, he comes up onto the land and he comes up out of the bottomless pit. Mm-hmm. So the great dragon was cast out of heaven. Okay. So he's got 3.5 years here once he's cast out. The accuser who's thrown down. Who can bring a charge or accusation against God's elect? Well, the whole thing's about the law in Romans 8. So I think that fits perfectly with that. They were accusing the brethren. Who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth. His angels are with him. I think that fits in some of that, but I'd like to hear y'all pick it apart.
So where is Satan in the abyss? Like when is he in the abyss? From the time of the temptation all the way up until this point?
I would say something like that. So
yeah,
bottomless pit, abyss, but he's not thrown down. Because you've got that struggle. The revealing of the sons of God is a real thing in Romans 8, because you still have that struggle between the two claiming to be who they are. Now, but Satan is bound so that he can't deceive the nations. Well, now he's not bound anymore. Now he's thrown down. So he's coming.
Is this when Paul is removed?
Yeah. So now he's coming to attack the church.
Or whoever that was, the restrainer. The restrainer is being removed.
I think that leads you to the little season or the 3.5 years. But that's I'd like to. Anyway, I want to hear. I don't know what Mike's fixing to say on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have a little bit of a difference opinion on Satan, but I think Rick brought up a good point when he said this is Daniel. So go to Daniel 10 and behold. So this is the same kind of concept that we have in Revelation. I don't know if it's the exact same thing, but this is kind of the imagery that he's giving. And behold, a man touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright. For now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. Then he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. So, man, I just don't understand. I guess, how would you understand that passage?
Well, Michael arises in chapter 12 of Daniel.
Right. That's what I'm saying is any Jew would understand. They would go to Daniel 10 to kind of interpret what is going on in Revelation 12. And so
Revelation 12 or Daniel 12?
No, Revelation 12,
because both have
they would go to Daniel 10 to
Hold on. What I'm trying to say is Daniel 12. Listen to what it says. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. That sounds just like Jesus in the Olivet Discourse telling them that this was going to be trouble like they'd never seen before or since or ever will be, right? Your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. That's Daniel 12 with Michael.
Right.
Are you saying Michael's Jesus?
I think he is. And so does a lot of other commentators.
James Jordan does.
David Chilton does. Matthew Henry's commentary, he thinks Michael is.
Well,
the Jehovah's Witnesses, they think that Jesus is.
You just destroyed Mike's position if he is.
I'm not trying to be weird. I'm just saying that's what a lot of commentaries say.
Mike's thing here is that Michael here is a spiritual being in Daniel 10. Therefore, if he's a spiritual being, then he's got to be a spiritual being in Daniel 12, and it can't be Israel, right? Or it can't be.
So Jesus was struggling. He was struggling with that. I mean, come on, man.
What? Look, it's not just me. I mean, there's all kinds of other commentators that saw this as well.
I know. I personally don't, but to be honest with you, I haven't studied that particular view. I've studied the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament.
Whoever he is, he's in the time of Daniel. He's in the time wrestling in Daniel's time, and he's also in the Revelation time. So it can't be a human being.
Here's another thing to think about, though. He's also in a vision every time.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean.
is that a vision that Daniel's talking about? That in the vision that Michael is being withstood in a vision for 21 days? What's going on is he's receiving the vision. Michael's the one that released the guy to come and give the vision. This obviously is some sort of otherworldly character that's not human. It can't be. I understand, Zach, but I see it as like a divine figure, but I also saw that, the
verse that keeps me from saying Michael is Jesus is Jude 9. Yet Michael the archangel, in contending with the devil when he disputed about the body of Moses, dared not bring a reviling accusation against him, but said, "The Lord rebuke you."
The Lord rebuke you.
So, but I don't know. So anyway, okay.
And as far as the accuser of the brethren, I don't know. I mean, I understand obviously the law accused, but look at Job. Here we clearly see the divine council, that is the watchers or the sons of God, being gathered with Satan in the spiritual or heavenly realm.
Or human friends who were the ruling powers.
Wait a second. They're in heaven, and then they're
Satan, Joseph's dream. Who were the sun, moon, and stars in Joseph's dream?
So you're saying that Job's friends were in heaven
that's
God.
That's imagery. Just like the sun, moon. Mike, you believe the sun, moon, and stars were destroyed in the first century. Who was the sun, moon, and stars? It was the rulers of the old covenant. That's the Jeremiah 31:35 I read a while ago.
So there's no angels in heaven. We have no.
Where's that at?
Verses anywhere in the Bible that talk about angels
I never said that. I'm talking about these texts.
That's where you have to go. I mean, if you're going to keep going down that path, I don't know how you don't go there.
As a preterist, you're already saying that.
The reason I don't go there is because I see some of these figures in particular times, and they have the same name. Gabriel is in Daniel's time, and he's also in Mary and Joseph's time. Michael
Both
is
times
in
in
Daniel's time, and they're. So, do you think that the vision? Do you think that the vision shows symbology of something when you say it that way, Zach?
I think the book of Numbers states that when God would reveal things, he would reveal it in a vision.
Right. So you think that these are like, in other words, does Michael and Gabriel actually exist, or are they just a vision for giving revelation?
That's what I'm getting at. I don't know, but I think it's possible because they always appear in a vision.
Well, what's possible because they appear in a vision that they don't exist?
Well, it's not that Daniel encountered, like he saw them in a vision. The angel didn't come, Michael didn't talk to Daniel like he did me and you. Whenever Zacharias comes out of the temple, it says they perceived he had seen a vision. Well, they understood that he saw the angel. That perceived is the same idea as they understood. That's a terrible translation. It don't mean they thought it. They knew that he had seen a vision, and he saw the angel in the vision. They're always seeing them in visions.
Okay, so if they see him, well, not always, but
not the shepherds. The shepherds didn't see a vision. The shepherds said the heavenly host arrived, and they were able to see it during the birth of Jesus. That wasn't a vision, or at least they didn't say it was.
And we also have accounts of Josephus saying that they saw angels fighting in the heavens.
Well, don't go to Josephus now. Let's stay in the text.
It's not Bible. I know that's weird. Hey, buckets. Oh, it's fun. I know you guys probably don't want to end this, but do you guys want to like slow this maybe down and come back to the war in heaven?
Yeah, I think we'll have to unravel the next part of it.
One of the things that I experienced on my podcast all the time is whenever we're all going back and forth and can never arrive, I get more emails during that because people are screaming at their radios like, no, it's this and no, it's that, and you're way wrong. This is going to be one of those episodes where everybody's like picking one of the 4 parts of the Brady Bunch here on our screen.
So can we lock this in either way? Because we need to bring clarity here to people listening.
Okay.
Because some people are new to Predators and watching this. Are we in agreement? Rick is not in agreement that this is about 66. You think it's possibly way earlier.
Hold on. Let me say it like this, okay? In that verse that Mike gives me, there is one thing that holds out. It's these birth pains, and that has to be during the tribulation. That has to be that time, which is Jesus. That's the only reason I say
birth pains. The birth pains are what takes place before the tribulation.
Well, but that's right. It's the birth pains and then. But my point is that that's the only reason I hold anywhere near AD 66. Everything else feels to me that it alludes to Christ and his ministry years, especially with the falling of Satan during the time when he sends out the disciples. I understand how we have, I'm only in Revelation 12. I'm not in Revelation 20 later on. Like in my brain, I'm just kind of like following this chronologically. And I know that's not the way that Revelation is written. So I'm up in the air. I'm up in the air, guys.
So Mike, you have Michael and his angels fighting with the dragon. You've got a supernatural thing here. You don't have it on the earth. It can be played out on the earth, but you've got this as something in heaven.
Yeah, it's
supernatural.
It's happening in both places.
And I am I'm more in that spot where Mike is there, at least at this point.
So, and I would see this as the dragon represented as Old Covenant Israel and the angels represented as Christ's followers, the Christians, the messenger, angelos.
Okay. And am I the only one that thinks that Michael is Jesus in this group? I think I am.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't know where I'm at on that. I'm sorry, Rick. I don't know where I'm at on Michael.
Oh, you have a question, but it wasn't for me. It was for the group.
Who's Babylon the harlot in the book of Revelation?
Israel.
But we all know that it's Old Covenant Jerusalem.
Okay. So in Revelation 18:23, it says that she deceives the nations. She deceives the whole earth.
Right.
And the devil, who's called the devil and Satan, deceives the whole world here in Revelation chapter 12. I mean, so I know people will listen to what I said and think, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. I don't think it's as crazy as what people think when you start studying this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. First
So bring
Timothy.
Job back up.
I mean, Job, I think Job is a slam dunk on your view, but anyway, First Timothy 4.
100% disagree.
Now the Spirit expressly says that in the last days some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. I mean, so just because you have one text that talks about old covenant or the leadership is deceiving the nation doesn't necessarily rule out the fact that there's supernatural powers that's influencing them to deceive the nations. So I would see doctrines of demons, Satan blinding the hearts of the Pharisees, hardening their hearts, deceiving them to believe in a self-righteous works-based salvation. And so I can see how they both go together. I don't see it as an either or.
Yeah, but you don't think it necessitates that there has to be some supernatural force behind? Because if you pull that slide back up, then you could see where the doctrine of demon goes on today, and you would destroy all the demons in 8070, right?
The doctrines of demons can still continue
Without the demons.
Without the demons.
Right. So that's my whole point. So it doesn't, I mean, but you said it both ways. So
yeah.
Well, here's the one thing, if you're new to preterism, or if people are here, wondering what's going on, to me, this is one of the most beautiful things about this study and other studies that I've had with people with open minds, is that we're wrestling with the text. This is part of it. If everybody came in saying, I'm rock solid and this is the way it is, then we'd be screaming at each other. But we're really trying, like tonight, you guys have made me think about my position, and I think I'm going to have to reframe it. I have to rethink this. And that's a good thing. I'm always learning, and I'm thankful for you guys, and I hope that those watching will be too.
Yeah, I've gotten as many positive comments about the fact that sometimes we can disagree with each other, in ways that other people are not used to hearing as much as what we've been sharing. So, yeah.
And this is one of the hardest chapters of Revelation. I mean, by far. I mean, it really is. It's we talked about, you have to understand the Old Testament. You have to understand symbols. You have to, it's all right here. I mean, like everything that you have to know to understand Revelation.
Yeah. And I think too, and I know we're going a little longer, but this is just my opinion. But it's not that it's not important to find out specifically what all these things are. And some are more important than others to find out. But as I understand it, the way that the Hebrew thought is more thinking in words and pictures, and you go back to the prophets and you see a lot of that. So sometimes I feel like I'm almost trying to pinpoint, and again, I'm not saying it's not important to pinpoint things, but I think in there, we still have a Western mindset, the way we look at this, and we still want to parse stuff a certain way systematically that I don't know that they did. And I think they were comfortable having, especially when these are called signs and symbols, having several meanings surrounding it that I personally am not as comfortable with. So that I'll just kind of throw that out there.
Yeah, and we also talked about what's hard about Revelation is trying to understand what's going on in the heavenly realm versus what's going on the earth. Sometimes he's seeing things in heaven that's describing what's already taking place on earth, but then the Hebrew mindset understood that things that are taking place in the spiritual realm mimic what's going on, and that the two worlds are connected. And that's where I think Zach kind of breaks from, like, I'm not interested in that. I want something super clear, either or. Whereas my view, I still see a Satan, an angelic being. I see angels. When I read the Gospels and they're casting out demons, to me, that seems to be pretty clear. But it's hard, because when you're studying something and you're trying to connect the dots, you'll start connecting some dots, and then you want to go over here and connect some dots. But can you? Right. And we're all looking for consistency, folks, and we have the framework figured out. That part is easy. Like, you have a big puzzle, you start with the corners and then you work your way in. We have the corner, we're just about there, but we're disagreeing on just a few little pieces here and there.
When I was in dispensationalism, the puzzle was turned upside down. So
I have one puzzle pieces to the wrong board.
Yeah. One final thought that I'd just like to share with everybody here, as well as those coming forward. Something that I saw that was beautiful, just to think about before we get back together next week, is that in Genesis, whenever the man and the woman fell, God kicked them out, and He kicked them out to the east. And then after that, after they had problems with Cain, Cain fled to the east.
Yep.
If you keep watching all of mankind throughout this, they keep going east.
Yep.
But what does the Son of Man do? He comes from the east and he comes to the west.
Yeah.
This is a restoration.
Yeah.
And not only is it a restoration, it's a birth of a kingdom that will never end. And He gives us access to that new garden city, that place. That's where we're heading. That's where we're heading to. So yes, the puzzle is in frame. We don't necessarily have all the pieces in here, but we know what that picture is. We're getting there.
Yeah.
Amen. And we rule the nations with the rod of iron through the preaching of the word of God. Nothing can withstand the church when she's the word of God. So
we all
That's
agree
right.
that the kingdom was heading to the saints, and the saints in the time of 80-70 possessed this kingdom.
amen.
That's right. We all agree with that.
Amen.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, I get that was it for today's study. We literally got 6 verses in and nowhere. So we'll see you next time.
Now, Rick, tomorrow are we doing the thing on Deuteronomy 32?
I would like to.
What time did we say?
I don't know. Are you going to do it live?
That's fine with me. Whatever you want to do, man.
Yeah, we can talk after the show. We'll pinpoint that. All right,
right.
guys. You be watching for that. I'm going to be interviewing Mike about his book.
All right, guys. Take
Bye
care.
for
We'll
now.
see you next week. Next week, we'll have everything figured out.